A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I got to sit down with Gary Windiate, who is an architect originally from England, however has made himself to be a standout name in Melbourne designing incredible spaces. His growing practice is called Windiate Architects, and on this week's episode, Gary and I spoke about the standout changes and the maximising of space that people value in their homes these days. I particularly love talking to Gary about how passionate he is about using natural materials in the incredible designs that Gary and his team works with. I really enjoyed sitting down with Gary this week, so let's get into it. Gary from Windiate Architects here in Melbourne, welcome to Build Hatch.
Nice to meet you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. We always like to talk to our guests and go back to their history and how they got into your profession. Now, you're an architect here in Melbourne. So where did you grow up? What was sort of childhood life like?
So I was born in England and I lived in England for, it's just coming up to half my life now. I moved over here when I was 24, 25. And so growing up was great. Things back then were simple. There was no real issues. You know, school was normal, the local comprehensive school, nothing too fancy or complex. Hanging out with mates after school, building things, just being outside, going for rides, bike rides. We lived in an area where they had quite a bit of open area, so it wasn't necessarily countryside, but it was about 60 kilometres southwest of London. And it was just what I would consider very normal.
So how often would you go into London from there?
Very rarely.
Yeah, it's
Very
funny.
rarely. I don't think I went
That's
into
why
London.
I asked.
Yeah. I think my first trip to London, I was about 16.
Yeah,
and we
right.
caught the bus up, which was quite an adventure, and to the Big Smoke.
How long did it take on the bus?
About an hour and a half. They had a few stops along the way, and you took a sandwich and a drink and your mates, and it was kind of the big day
Suitcase.
trip out. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? How it's different like that.
Yeah, and everything seems to be much more accessible nowadays, whereas back then it wasn't. And we didn't really look for the big adventure. You know, we were very happy where we were, had a lot of friends, just hanging out at friends' places was the key. But hanging out outside, which, I think the kids nowadays miss a lot of that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, did you always know that you were going to be an architect?
I did. and people find that very hard to believe. But I think when I was very young, I wanted to be in the army. When I got to high school, I had a passion for cooking and drawing and art. And then my parents engaged an architect to do an extension to the house that we had. And I just loved the drawings he did. I was fascinated by the technical aspect of the drawings. And from that moment onwards, I thought I wanted to be an architect. And towards the end of school, I was a bit unsure because I still loved cooking. But I had this realization that I couldn't be an architect part-time or on the weekend, but I could cook for enjoyment. So I chose architecture as a profession, and I just decided that I could always cook and do cooking for enjoyment.
Yeah, right.
But I find both the professions very similar. They both doing things for other people. You know, when you're cooking, you're creating a meal for somebody. When you're designing a home, you're creating a home for them. So they're very similar in that respect, both creative. So I like both. However, at the end of school, I failed my exams because the last year of school was all about it. I started to just have fun. I realised that life was a bit more about having fun and friends, and then failing the exams was a big reality check. And it was like, right, I can't do architecture anymore. So my parents said to me, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, I'll be a graphic designer because that's artistic. And then I thought to myself, no, I don't want to settle. I don't want to settle for being something that I don't necessarily want to be. So I retook my exams in a year, passed them, and then went on to uni.
Interesting story there. Now, if I unravel it a bit, did you have to do the exams like 12 months later, like a whole
Yes, yeah.
year again?
I had to take another course at not at the school where I was studying my A levels, because in the UK you do A levels, and that's your final exams. So I ended up going to a technical college for a year to do
So
a
it's similar
condensed
to like
version.
TAFE in Australia or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah, it would be, yeah. And
And
our A levels are similar to your, is it HSC or is that
yeah, VC, depending
VCE?
where it's
That's
at,
it.
VCE, HSC,
Yeah,
yeah, depending which state. But also, one of the great things we have here in Australia is they sort of call it typically open foundation. So for
yeah,
those that don't want to do a trade, become a chef or a hairdresser or tradesman or tradeswoman, they they can obviously do open foundation, which is an alternative way of getting into uni, and that's great because there are so many people like yourself where they just, I don't know, school sometimes just isn't designed for some people. Like it just
yeah.
doesn't,
I
it
agree.
doesn't fit everyone's mold. Even today, like I still think there's so many different aspects to it where you sort of do find yourself, particularly with kids' homework, I reckon, like you
Yeah,
do find yourself thinking, is this really relevant? Like, would I prefer my child to be learning a little bit more either practical or realistic professional type learnings?
yeah.
So it's interesting. I think most people who then go back and do that extra course, they find themselves doing a lot better. Is that what you found?
Look, I totally agree. I think if I'd have gone to university at the age of 18, I'd have probably failed because I wasn't mature enough to take the studies seriously. And I would have jumped into university and then I would have gone, oh my gosh, this is hard work. Because we were in uni 9 till 1 every day doing lectures like physics, planning, history, plumbing, all of those things. And then in the afternoon from 2 till 6, we were expected to be in the studio drawing, designing, and doing that side of things. And that was for the full 5 years. It never let up and it only got harder and harder. So if you didn't love it, we saw people drop out because they just kind of went, I don't want to put this much effort into something that I don't absolutely love. My eldest stepdaughter as well, she did a different path through her high school. And it's only now, she's coming up to being 21, she's decided to go back and study nursing because she's just tried a few things and I think she's been a little bit concerned about, well, what happens if I don't like it? And it's a case of, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Don't get stuck in a job just because you feel you need to. You've got to find a passion and something that really drives you, and hopefully that you'll love, because if you love it on the hard days, they're not that hard, and you can get through the hard days if you love your job. If you don't love your job and you have a hard day, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah, that's right. And I particularly love lifelong learning and I'm a big advocate for that where, just because you do a particular trade or profession doesn't mean you're locked into it for life and
Correct.
you get to 30 and you realize, oh, geez, I should have done that. You can just continually evolve and learn throughout your whole life, really.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And to that end, I've always wanted to be an architect, and I love being an architect. But just recently, I've started to do my certificate 3 in fitness,
Yeah,
just
great.
because I like fitness, and that will lead to I can help out at the local gym where I do boxing and help out with their classes just because I like it. I'm not going to give up my career and take that as a new career, but I want to do it because I enjoy it, and it's another aspect and another string to my bow, as it were.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I love it. Like I said. So, all right. So you completed all your studies over in the UK and then what
Yes.
happened?
So in the UK, you study a 3 year degree, and then you do a year in industry as a placement year, and then you go back to do a postgrad diploma. Now, my industry year ended up being out here. My industry year was in '94 when there was a bit of a recession around the world. Nobody in the UK was hiring. I applied for businesses all around the world, and I ended up meeting an architect who had a large company here, and he also had a company in the UK. And so while he was in the UK, he asked me to come up and meet him. And so I went up and I thought it was just a meeting. It ended up being an interview. And he said, I'd like to offer you the placement year. And I thought to work in the London office. And then he said, so when can you get out to Melbourne? And I think my jaw dropped. And I kind of went, right, okay, I'm going. And he said, the Australian embassy's just down there. Go and get the paperwork, bring it back here. We'll start filling in the forms and we'll get it all in place. And the next thing I know, I'm filling in forms and getting visas and stamps and stickers in my passport and on a plane out here with a backpack. And that was it. That was the beginning of my journey.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
And
what was
I
it
love
daunting?
Melbourne. So, pardon me?
Was it daunting? Sort of just because you hadn't
It
been to
was.
Melbourne
It
before,
was a
obviously.
bit. No, I'd never been. I'd been to Europe, been to France and Italy, but I'd never been this far. But it's interesting. I wanted to come to Australia for many years, having grown up with home and away and neighbours, and I saw Australia as America, but without all the clutter. And so when I got on the plane, I think I was more excited than nervous. And I was met at the airport by my boss's daughter, who I'd met in London, and a friend, another friend, and their friend had a place, a room in their house. So he said, "Oh, look, you can stay with us until you kind of find your feet and work out what you want to do." And I ended up living there for a year in Richmond, made lifelong friends, and still keep in touch with them now. And John actually flew over to the UK for my wedding, or to France for my wedding 5 years ago, because he now lives in Europe. And Adam and Paul and Clive are still great friends living here in Australia.
Wow. That must have been like a hell of an adventure too, just landing and then getting to know everyone and yeah, very daunting.
Yeah, it was very much so, but I'm very much the sort of person that just kind of gets out there, and I've got no problem talking to people. And I would go and meet somebody, and then we would meet their friends, and we'd go to a party or a dinner, and I'd start chatting to somebody else, and then they'd invite me somewhere else, and then all of a sudden I left here after a year having established quite a wide friendship group, which was great. And some, like I said, quite a few I still keep in touch with now, nearly 25 years, nearly 30 years on.
Now, tell me about Windiate Architects. How did that sort of transpire?
So I spent from 98, I moved out here permanently in 98 after working in the UK for a bit and realising I didn't fit there. I think when I came to Australia, I missed my family and friends. When I was back in the UK, I missed Australia and I missed Melbourne. So I came over here in 98, worked for three large practices over a period of time till about 2004 or 5. And then I started to do a little bit of work with a friend of mine, just on the side, just because we wanted to do a couple of small projects. And then we started to think a bit more seriously about going out on our own. And then in 2007, I'd been suffering from back problems. And then in 2007, I decided I couldn't do any more, and I had to have back surgery. So at that point, I couldn't commit to the office I was working for, and I couldn't give my all to them. So I decided to have the back surgery. And then during the recovery of the back surgery, I started working kind of part time with my friend. And then after doing that for about a year, we both decided we wanted different things out of it. So in early 2008, I decided to start my own business. Just at the time when my partner at the time was pregnant with our son. So I had a newborn on the way.
Plus the GFC looming.
GFC looming, and started my own business because I realised I didn't want to go back to work for somebody else. I wanted to have flexibility for my family. I wanted to be there when my son was born. I wanted to be involved in his early years and didn't want to go out to work and necessarily come back and miss that. So I think the main reason for starting my own business was having flexibility. It certainly wasn't the drive of money. It was the drive of flexibility and doing my own projects, the smaller projects that I'd moved away from working with other people. The businesses that I'd worked for, two were very large practices here in Melbourne, and one was a small practice that grew while I was there for 5 years. and they'd moved away into bigger developments, bigger projects. And I really missed that hands-on approach that we had with the clients, and dealing with the mum and dad clients and, their family, and knowing their kids, and understanding how we're going to create this beautiful home for them that they'll use and they'll appreciate.
Yeah, because I mean, for people listening to this, when you're working in large sort of commercial practices where the architectural documentation for multi-story buildings and large commercial projects, like it's kind of, I won't say boring, but it's not really in touch with why you typically would get into the profession in the first place, with that creativeness and the dealing with clients and taking spaces and value adding and all that sort of stuff. Isn't like it's just monotonous documentation, and it can be quite intense, really.
It can be. You could be stuck on a large building just drawing up and detailing facades or toilet petitions or wall types. And it can be soul destroying, really. It can really suck the life out of you. I think small practice has taught me that you need to be across all aspects, and you kind of just dig in and get stuck in. Like, I'm the director and the owner of the business, but I'm still drawing. I'm still putting together window schedules. I'm still putting together elevations and working on things, because how I do my meetings with clients are very much interactive. And I'll be designing and drawing and sharing my screen and creating things on the screen, and live with my clients. And that's something that came out of COVID, which was a great takeaway for me, because I no longer sit down with clients and a pencil and paper and sketch things up and then go away and test it. And well, that didn't quite work, and come back and do it again. And that didn't quite work. And then you go back and do it again. And you have a lot of that toing and froing and time. So COVID really taught us to be time efficient, and my clients really love, being involved in that designing, because they'll say things like, "Well, how about we move that?" "Well, let's move it." "Oh, it doesn't work." "Well, that's going to clash with the door." "Well, that toilet's going to clash with something." Or, "If we do that, the shower's going to be above this room, which is going to be problematic. We'll have to need a beam there. That's going to be an issue." And they can see these things evolving in real time. So they really appreciate and get an understanding of what and how we do.
Yeah, look, it's so true, and I I, I can sort of tell you're the kind of guy that loves taking spaces and value adding. So tell us, like, is that something that you love doing? Like clients coming to you and saying, "Well, this doesn't work." Like, how do you make it work?
Um, I suppose I see it as a puzzle. I look at every job as a puzzle, and I start from. I've always been one to not necessarily. Well, I suppose I understand budgets, but I can't control budgets. I say to my client, I have clients come to me and say, "Oh, look, we think we want to renovate this, and we've got this amount of money. Do you think that's viable?" And I will now say to them, if you'd have asked me this 18 months, 2 years ago, I could have probably given you a fairly good estimate, but now it's very difficult.
Yes.
I look, but I've always been one to start, regardless of the budget, I've always been one to try and drill down with my clients and understand what's important to them. And I say this to all of my clients, there's buckets for everything. There's buckets of money for should have, could have, would have, want, need, maybe, do I, don't I, my husband wants, my wife wants, my kids want. And it's about trying to put things in those buckets and then work out what's important. How do for one client, the laundry trough was important. For another client, it was how far they went into the garden was important. For another client, it was a particular view and an aspect from one of their windows that was very important. And so everybody's got something very different. Yeah, so understanding what's important for them and what their needs are, and helping them understand it, because most clients have got a whole lot of information in their head and they just don't know what to do with it. And so I see my job is distilling that information and helping them unravel their thoughts and bring to the party my expertise and my thoughts. And we've got some great ideas from clients, and they've got some great ideas from us. And I'm not the sort of architect that will sit there and dictate my vision. My vision is a shared vision. Their vision is a shared vision, and it's working together to get the right result. And I've had clients to say, "Oh, look, well, can you draw us up a few options?" And my response to that is, "That's not how I work. I don't give you 3 or 4 options and then you choose the option you like. I come up with something that I think fits your brief and fits your budget and fits the way you want to live in the house. And from there, we continually refine it. We don't just come up with a concept, draw it up, thank you very much, move on to the next client. It's a continual evolution of the process, and we're changing things right up to the point where they might move in, and not changing for change's sake. But I'll always say to my clients, don't be scared of making a change on site, but just talk to me about it, and we'll understand whether that has a time or a cost implication. If you feel that something is not right, you need to speak up, and we enter into this relationship, which what it is, and with a good sense of open communication and trust. And I want my clients to be able to say to me, "Gary, I either just don't understand it or I don't get it." Okay, we'll give you more information to help you understand it until you do understand it. Or even if they say, "Gary, it's just not for me. I understand where you're going with this, but I don't like that, or I don't want that." And I'll say, "That's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that. Let's work to something that I still think works, because I'm not here just as a drafting service or to just draw up what you want me to draw up. However, if you really want something that I don't think is probably the appropriate thing to do, I'll give you all that information. And if you still want to go ahead with it, that's okay. We'll do it."
But
But
at least
most
let's go
clients,
through that process.
absolutely. I see my job as giving them all the information that they need to be able to make a considered decision. And then once they know they've made that decision, they go, "Well, I feel comfortable in making that decision because Gary's given me all this information, all the pros and cons. I've weighed it all up. And although Gary said he felt this way was a better way, I'd like to go this way, and I'll accept that." It's their money, it's their home. I can only give them my years of experience as to why I would do it or wouldn't do it. And it's really up to them to say whether they want to accept that or don't.
What's it like when you have a client who sort of says, "Oh, this is what we want," and then Gary comes along, thinks about their brief, what they want to utilize with that space or do with it, and then you do something, and I won't say necessarily expecting, but do you know what I mean? Like, it must be a pretty
Yeah,
cool feeling because I've been a part of that myself.
yeah,
Um, when you think you know something and you think you know what you want, and then an architect comes along, manipulates that idea or manipulates that space, or manipulates probably the wrong word, influences that creation, and then you kind of think you've got exactly what I wanted, but
yeah.
more.
It's
It's
great.
better.
Yeah, it is great. But I think
It's a cool feeling.
manipulate the space, I think, is the right choice of words, and influence the clients and help them open up their mind and expand their thinking. And it is great. And just recently, I can't remember the exact thing, but that happened. And the clients went, "Do you know what? I didn't think of that. And I came to you with this in mind. And you've just opened up these possibilities." And it's fantastic because what we've got now is so much better than what we thought we would have. And it's what we thought we probably could have, but didn't think we could get it, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good way to put it. What's sort of currently emerging at the moment, like in spaces and cool sort of projects and things like that?
Oh, look, right now, I think it's trying to make projects viable. I think in a really volatile construction industry with escalating costs and money borrowing, I think it's the most complex thing at the moment is to try and make projects viable and manage clients' expectations, because what people expect they can get for 300 is probably costing them now 500. And the smaller projects are becoming really, really hard. I wouldn't say impossible because I love a challenge. And if somebody's got a bucket of money, there is a way of spending that money on something. It's just trying to work out how best they can spend that. And how I approach all of our projects here is very much what's the least amount we can do to gain the maximum result for the money that the clients are acceptable, not necessarily always happy, but acceptable to spend.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
it's a good way to put it.
yeah.
And I also think too, it's also like I know a lot of builders who are having to do a bit more groundwork, like not necessarily more groundwork than what they used to, but we're now back in normal territory in inverted commas, where before you know late probably up until about October in 2022, the price that you gave was the price that you gave, and that was kind of it. That was expected. Whereas now it's about doing the groundwork. It's about not accepting that lazy pricing methodology. It's having input, and I still think the preferred way is architects dealing with builders from the early stages and having their input and trying to get them on board to be able to also influence the project and help out as well. Do you agree with that?
Look, I agree with having the builder on board early for sure. I'm not necessarily agreeing in that I think things are back to a kind of normal. I still see a lot of escalating prices, and I'm still seeing a lot of how you put it, lazy estimating and lazy pricing from builders, not because they're lazy, but they're very time poor.
Exactly.
And
And when I mean, just to clarify, when I mean normal, I mean like before COVID, you would go out and get multiple prices. You would shop around. You would have multiple trades competing. You would have multiple materials. And whereas, in the last 3 years, because of constraints and issues and being time poor, like you said, it's kind of like, I'll just get one supply price from that person and that. And do you know what I mean? We're back to normal. We're now
yeah,
trying to have to work to make it work.
yeah, I think with all of the builders that we are working with and have worked with, I don't think they've changed their approach pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID. I think where they've seen differences is their trades have become exceedingly busy and the trades don't have time to quote. So I think it's a tier down from the builder. And I know I speak to a lot of builders regularly that we work with, and just to touch base every couple of months, I'll ring around and see how they're going and how they think the industry is going. And everybody thought this year would be a better year. Everybody thought last year would be a better year. But with the trades being busy and a shortage, I think there's a real shortage of labour in this country at the moment with migration. And we've lost a lot of labour and haven't picked up that labour in the workforce in the construction industry to make the labour that is here be competitive. And I still don't think that's there. I know the builders I'm speaking to recently saying my joiner just doesn't have time to price it. So I just put in a lump sum of money that I think it will be, and I've just got to hope that it comes in at that sort of price. But I think by that, then builders are factoring in a fair amount of fat to cover themselves because they have been caught out over the last 12 to 18 months. And that's driving up prices to a point where we had 4 projects last year either pause, stop, or change to be a much smaller project from a a smallish renovation extension project to a new kitchen or to a new bathroom. And then and my point for my house as well, I was looking to renovate my house and extend it, and I had drawings ready early last year, couldn't find the builder to price it. And now I reckon the price is probably 40% over where I want to pay. So I've gone back to drilling down, what do I need out of my home? What do I need? Not what do I want? And I think the last 6 months, the projects are going ahead with people that need to renovate. People that wanted to renovate are not renovating. People that wanted to extend are just doing a new kitchen and a new bathroom. And I think those that need to renovate, they've been living in a really rundown home or a house that they've just hated for a long time, and their bathroom, they put their foot floor through the bathroom floor, and this is now they need to renovate. And they're the projects that we're seeing at the moment. We're not seeing projects where, look, we'd love to have a nicer backyard, open kitchen, living, dining area. We'd love to have that spare room when guests come over, they could stay. Now it's like I've been sick and tired of living in this house, my kitchen, working from home. My husband now needs a home office. My wife now needs a home office. We both now need a home office.
Our kids can't afford to rent, so they
Yes.
need bigger
Yeah. Well, I think
spaces.
that's where it's going to head. I look at house prices and I think, how the hell are my kids going to be able to afford to buy a house? But my eldest stepdaughter, who doesn't live with me, she's bought into a development where she's put down a deposit. This apartment building will be built. She'll move in and she'll pay rent for the next X years, and that rent goes off to paying off the cost of the apartment. So at the end of it, she then owns this little one-bedroom studio apartment. And I think that's a great idea for young people to get into the market and have a bit of property, and then they can leverage off that later. They can go traveling. They've still got somewhere here they can rent out. They've got a base they can use. And later on, when they meet a partner, they've got a property that they can sell to be able to move something, then start getting their foot on the ladder.
Yeah, it's definitely opening up some creative opportunities, and that's what happens
Yeah.
in our industry. It has to happen. Otherwise, I say this all the time: leaders will lead, and if people don't, well, you're just accepting the status quo, um, and it does create opportunities, and out of challenges in the industry, there'll be plenty of designers and architects and builders and trades who will still flourish because, like I said, they're trying harder, or they have access to good trades, or good clients as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it was Winston Churchill that said, "Don't waste a good crisis." And out of adversity, you can get some great results. I certainly know now that there are builders that I've been working with that have come out of COVID better because they're now more streamlined. They're now more processes in place. And that has taught them to be more efficient. And with efficiency comes profit.
yeah, 100%. And I love talking about things like that because I totally agree. It is about being efficient and squeezing more juice out, lemonade out of lemons. Like, it's just absolutely trying to be as efficient as possible. Just like clients need to be efficient. If you can deliver them an efficient construction model and design model, um, you know, m- from meeting with them through networking, like, it's the whole process from go to O, really.
Yeah, yeah. And if the things that we learn with our continual professional development, which is something we have to do as an architect here in Victoria, it makes you look into new products. But sometimes new products can bring with it a cost. And something I learned from one of my old bosses was how to use normal materials in an interesting way. And if you use normal materials in an interesting way, some simple out of the box thinking with detailing, all of a sudden you've got a great result and it hasn't cost you any more. We've done a couple of bathrooms where we've used white tiles, but we've mixed the white tiles with, some have been gloss and some have been matte. So you get this slight pattern across the wall. Now, it hasn't cost you any more because the tiles are the same and the tile is still laying the same amount of tiles. But on certain light, in a certain aspect, you get a different sense of depth in what would ordinarily be a white wall.
So true. Do you have like a favorite sort of product at the moment, or material that you just love using as an architect?
Look, I love using wood just because I like tactile materials. And I think over the years, I've learned how to use wood carefully and not. So there's certain, if you've got to, because you've got to maintain wood. So when you're using wood, you've got to think of it as a product that you're going to have a relationship with for the rest of your life, the rest of the time you're living in the house. So if you're using a nice wood cladding, you've got to be able to maintain it. There was a house we used, which was one of my favourites in Hampton, where we used wood cladding on the first floor. But we used wood cladding on the first floor because we knew our clients were never going to maintain it. And it was always going to go grey. And now it's gone this beautiful timber grey colour sitting on top of a black brick house space. And it just looks sensational. And they use timber on the ground floor.
What sort of timber?
It was a black butt cladding. And they use black butt decking and on the ground floor, but they maintain that. So the first floor is this beautiful grade off black butt timber box. And the ground floor is a very beautiful, maintained, really rich depth of black butt. And the balance of that works really well. Again, we've used some black bricks as almost a plinth to the building.
Yeah, look, I agree. I love the raw materials, and like you said, it's about that long term relationship. It's not just, oh, this is how it's going to look from day one, and it'll stay like that. Like it's part of the journey and the aging of the project.
Yeah, like I like to use timber handrails because you touch them. And things you touch, I like to be warm. So I don't like steel handrails where they're cold to touch. So the timber handrails I like. So timber became a little bit more expensive last year, but so we use it sparingly. We've used zinc cladding before, but we've used it sparingly, not the whole house. I like to use metal cladding a bit more on the first floor now because it's bulletproof, it's weatherproof, it doesn't need maintenance. A product called WeatherText we've started to use a bit over the years because it's a really good environmental product. This is what they used to use. They used to take everybody else's offcuts of wood, they'd chip it and pulp it, and they'd press it under steam presses, and the steam presses would be run by their offcuts. And you'd press this 6 mil board that had a 20-year lifespan. So even if the paint coating broke down, the board itself wouldn't break down. So it was very light, it was thin, it was easy to maintain, but it needed to be painted, which was okay. But it had an environmental aspect to it as well.
Yeah, certainly, and yeah, WeatherTex is a pretty good Australian story because they've got quite, they've sort of taken advantage of. They've got a large manufacturing facility up in northern New South Wales near Newcastle there. And like you said, just being able to take a run of the mill product, pulp it all together, and then produce multiple types of cladding. Yeah, very clever and efficient too.
Yeah, and it's nice to use Australian products where we can. And like I've always been that way inclined, but I think COVID's brought that home. Like COVID's made me shop more locally, and now be involved in the Fairfield Traders Association. So, I'm involved in the community aspect of it. Fairfield have got a lawn bowls club here, and I've become a member there and go down and chat to the old guys down there, and they're the history and the life of the area. And it's really great to feel a part of the community. And so myself and my staff go up there every now and then during summer, and I've paid for their membership, and we would go up there and bowl. We haven't done that for a month, a few weeks now, but I'm keen to get another session up there because it's just a nice way of spending a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, look, I was about to ask you, what do you like to do outside of work? And, that's really nice to hear. You have that community spirit and immersing yourself into the local community. I think that's, really important, and we should do more of it too.
I think we should. I think around where I live here, it's, you see these high fences going up with remote gates. People come home from work, they drive into their house, they close the gate, they spend time with their family, and they kind of forget about their neighbours. Whereas I'm one for having a chat with my neighbour over the fence, and passing something over, and oh, Gary, have you got this? Yeah, I'll just I'll go and grab that and I'll pass it over. And can we borrow a couple of chairs? We've got people coming round. Yeah, no problem. Come over and grab some chairs.
Yeah, that's really nice.
And I organise a bit of a Christmas function at my place with my neighbours. We just open up the backyard and people come over, bring a plate and a few drinks, and we just catch up and chat. And it's been really good. But COVID made everybody a little bit almost shy of catching up. And it's slowly coming back to normal. But the last couple of years, the Christmas parties, the numbers have dwindled. People have got other things on. It's not, they've kind of started to lose that community feel again.
Yeah, for sure. Kudos to you, Gary. I think it's it's always inspiring talking to people such as yourself, and well done to you. Not only being a large contributor to Melbourne's architecture, but also the local community. I think it's a really special thing, and thank you for sharing your story here on Build Hatch.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much for having me. It's been enjoyable. I like to talk about my job, and I like to talk about things architecture. And I think I could talk forever.
Now, on that, if people listen to this who want to reach out and have a chat with you and discuss their project or just get some advice on their career, what's the best way to go about it?
I think through the website, or just give me a ring on the phone number. I've been involved in a mentoring program, which I was really excited about through the architects industry, but it didn't really lead to much. I remember having a chat to a young architect in Sydney about helping her with where she was going in her studies and her career. And I've had a few young architects send me CVs to look over and give them a bit of guidance. And I'm more than happy for that. I'm more than happy for students to ring me and have a chat about the profession, come in and, we'll go next door to the cafe next door. And again, I have meetings in the cafe. I have staff meetings in the cafe because I like to give back to the local business. And I'm more than happy to have a chat with somebody if a client is just unsure about where they need to go. Like if somebody's going, I want to renovate my house, but I just don't know who to speak to. I'm more than happy to chat to people like that and give them some guidance and talk them through the process, because I really think it's important that an architect is involved in all aspects of renovation. Like I said, it's just, don't be afraid to reach out and ring me and say, look, Gary, can I just have a chat to you about, I think I want to renovate the house, but I don't know. And I'd be more than happy to say, look, I really don't think you need an architect, because what you want is really simple and you're really clear on what you want and you're really clear in how you want to go about it. So there's no point paying an architect to be involved. Or you've got a good understanding of what you want, but I think just your thought process is not quite there. So engage us just for a feasibility or concept design, or I've been engaged by a client just to run thoughts by. And we just used to meet up. She'd pay me for the hour and we just talk about things so she could get her thoughts together and work. She was actually working with somebody else, but she was a friend of one of my clients and she just wanted somebody to use as a sounding board. Do you think this would be a good idea? What about this? Do you think, am I crazy thinking this? So yeah, I've got it's amazing how much and I've never really realized until the last few years how much I do know just by opening up and speaking to people. And I've even had people that I've worked for, sort of senior level in bigger practices, they've gone out and doing their own thing, or they want to renovate their own house. They would ring me up and ask me for my advice. And it's kind of like, wow, like 20 years ago, I was looking up to you. And now we're having a chat and I'm giving you my thoughts and my advice on how I would approach it. And you're listening. And
It's important. And it's about, I guess, valuing that relationship too.
It is,
so,
yeah.
Having those authentic
Very much so.
conversations.
And communication is the key to any relationship. The relationship with my wife, the relationship with my kids, the relationship with my clients, the relationship with the builders that we work with, my staff, the local barista. If you're having a bad day, it's okay to say, do you know what, I'm having a bad day and sorry if I'm cranky, rather than just acting like an idiot and being rude and walking away and going, well, that wasn't wrong, but I now feel stupid about saying anything about it. Everybody has bad days and it's perfectly fine. And everybody makes mistakes, but it's how you bounce back from them and it's how you deal with them that makes you the person that you are, I think.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And like I said, Gary, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being honest and real and having an authentic conversation. It's, that's what this show's about. So I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired by your story and giving back. So well done. And thanks again for coming on to Build Hatch.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks very much, Alan.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Gary Windiate from Windiate Architects in Melbourne. I really encourage you to reach out to Gary and his team online. As usual, if you know a hard worker having a go in the construction space or a building related business, person or product where you love what they are doing or selling, then please do get into contact with us and we'll be more than happy to tell their story and get behind their goods or services on the BuildHatch marketplace. Our team are busy rolling out independent sellers on buildhatch.com as we speak, so stay tuned for more and more products and services as they onboarded. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a BuildHatch developed production.